gosh, I just realized what it means.
Hello, hello, and welcome everyone to In Time. My name is Nicholas Lamar Soutter. Thank you very much for joining us. I've been looking forward to this one for a while. But before we get into that, I wanted to let everyone know that we've got our Patreon meeting coming up. So that's the first Monday of every month. So that's next week. We're going to have our patron hangout. Those of you who support us, we really appreciate it. We are supported by people, volunteers, many also on our Discord, who help give us the news and help us organize the show. So thank you all, and anyone who is a supporter is always welcome to our patron hangouts. One great way to support this show is to become one, and then you can come in and I was going to say give us ideas that we can borrow for the show, but all that aside, it seems to be as much as anything just to find ways to give me harassment about the fact that I never have my mic settings correct. At any rate, we're also going to be doing a rundown on Thursday as usual. I'm working on a special guest for the rundown. Vox is out of town. She seems to think that there's something about communing with nature and doing all of those things. So I don't if she can make it or not, I think we're gonna have it's the news, but I think we're gonna have an educational experience on Thursday. So today we're going to be discussing, and this show, everybody knows, has a bit of a liberal bent, and certainly religion is a topic that we talk about. We've had on a lot of atheists to discuss their deconversion. We've even had on some theists to discuss their conversions, because I think it's interesting to hear all sides of this. But today we're going to have on Randolf Richardson, the president of Canadian Atheists, to discuss his organization, what they do, and a little bit about what it is to be a theist, an atheist, and or anti-theist. We're going to talk a little bit about that, cancel culture, a few other topics that have come up. Now, if you would like to get a comment in, please don't hesitate to just type something into our live chat. However, for this, we decided to stream also on Periscope. If you are watching on Twitter, hashtag @InTimeShow, or just at us, and I'll get those comments. Obviously, we try to get to all comments. I think people have a lot of comments that are just great stuff that we bring in, but super chats always come in first. If you want to make sure that I see it, hit us up with a super chat. But barring all that, let us bring out the guest of the day, Randolf Richardson. So, Randolph, how are you?
Great. Thanks for inviting me onto your show. I'm very happy to be here.
Yeah, it's a delight to have you here. You and I had actually spoken, and something that most people don't know is, most people here know I'm a writer, but what they don't know is that one of the writing projects I had done, I purchased two domain names, the Gun Control Codex and the Atheist Codex. And the reason I did this was because I also had a background in philosophy. I found a few new arguments that I thought had never been tried before for atheism/anti-theism and for gun control. And I figured it'll take me a month to bang out each of those sites and, go at it. And about 2 years later, I was still working on the atheist one, but it had become sort of a social networking blog. We actually had on theists, polytheists. We were reaching out to Daniel Dennett's clergy project to try to get support for people who deconvert, which may be an interesting topic because I think a lot of anti-theists today sort of think it should be like that and don't understand how painful it can be for people. And, and then I ended up, there's just much more time came onto this show. So, but that's certainly something I've had an interest in. And you and I had spoken like 2 years ago, I think, about it briefly. And so here we are finally having a discussion I think we were going to have about 2 years ago. I had seen you.
It's been that long. Wow.
I think so. I think that sounds about right. So, and we do have a $10 super chat from a Xandering person. Xandering, thank you. And he says, I just want to force you to publicly acknowledge me. If I had read the super chat first, I wouldn't have said anything, but I acknowledged him and then read I do not like that man. I do not like that man. At any rate, thank you, Xandering, for the super chat. I appreciate it. It has been a while, and Now, you and I sort of got back into the same circles because I started getting back into just sort of these kinds of discussions and debating. And I saw that you had done a debate on modern day debates, and whether or not debating is useful is helpful. But why don't you first start by telling us a little bit about your organization and what the goals of that organization are?
And then maybe you can tell me which debate you saw, because I've been on there a number of times. The Canadian Atheists, www.canadianatheists.ca is the website, is an organization I started here in Canada to try to do a number of things. One of the most important is to counter vilification against atheists and to try to bring normalization of atheism in society. And what I mean by normalization is to make it so that where people see it as normal to be a theist, somebody who believes in deities, I'm just basically wanting it to be the same for atheists, that we're considered just as normal. Because we're just people. So when, for example, if somebody in casual conversation indicates that they follow a religion, they believe in a certain deity or a number of deities, the typical reaction is, oh, okay, and carry on. Sometimes people might have more interest, but there's usually not any condescension or any vilification or any kind of pushback for that. But when an atheist like myself says that I don't believe in any deities, I'm not part of a religion, then sometimes that's met with condescension and sometimes anger and sometimes shock and surprise and concern for my well-being and whatnot, which I think all of this is really inappropriate and not relevant to the fact that I just don't believe in deities. So what I'm hoping for with the Normalize Atheism hashtag to help promote this campaign is to get it so that we're just seen as equal members of society to all the theists, and not being unfairly vilified or ridiculed for stuff. There is a website attached to this campaign at www.normalizeatheism.ca, and it explains all of this in better than I've just explained it now. It's all text only at this point, but I am working on a fancier design in the future for it. So, but all the content will remain there. So yeah, that's what I'm doing here. When I started the Canadian Atheists a few years ago, probably at least 5 years ago now, there was really, in Canada, it's not a hot button issue like it is in some other countries to be an atheist or to be even an anti-theist or a humanist, etc., a secularist. There's many different terms that get in there. So the way I feel is that if I were to work on starting this kind of organization, say 20 years later from now, then probably it could be a bigger issue, but right now it is a smaller issue, so it's easier to, I guess, nip it in the bud and get things all straightened out. I'm making the job easier for myself and for others to proceed with these efforts now instead of later on when it turns into something bigger, because I do sense that there has been a gradual increase here in Canada of people who are trying to push back against atheists, as the Statistics Canada, our government organization that reports on statistics about Canadian culture and the world, and on different views that Canadians have and whatnot, are finding that there's more and more people who don't believe in any deities here and aren't part of any religions. So I think this is becoming more noticeable to religious people, and some religious people probably see it deep down, that the writing's on the wall. Religion is in some ways in its death throes nowadays. And so their automatic reaction is to be defensive and push back against this, because they don't want to lose these traditions that they're quite familiar with. And I can understand if something's changing, it can be quite stressful for people to figure out how they're going to have to adjust their lives and the way they interact with people and the loss of a tradition that brings a great sense of nostalgia for them. So, I don't want to see that kind of stuff become a major problem for people. But the reality is that the world changes as time carries on, and so we do need to adapt, and we do see adaptation in some ways, but not in others. And I think that's going to feed into the anti-theism part that you want to talk about later.
Well, I have, and I'm curious to know how much these numbers have changed. Now, most of my information, of course, is going to be about the United States. That's where I'm from. That's the country that's going to be my primary area of concern. But I will say a couple of things. Right after 9/11, Pew Research did a study on trust in atheists amongst other religious groups, and believe it or not, atheists still came in under Muslims, barely, but under Muslims in the United States in terms of trust, and over one other group only. One other, child rapists. This was in terms of who would you...
I remember reading that. So yeah.
So this was a Pew study, and it has oscillated, and atheists have gone up and down a bit, but not much. And one of the things, and I'd had this discussion briefly with Arlen Ra, and this is a topic we'd like to actually have him back on to discuss, because in terms of politics, it seems to me we will... Now, I try to be very careful when I say this, because to me, we've had a lot of Islamophobia. I don't use Islam as an example because I think that there's anything inherently wrong with Muslims. I use it as an example because in the United States, for the most part, we are Islamophobic and we're very concerned about Muslims. And what I found is you could be of any other religion, including Islam, and be more likely to be elected president of the United States than an atheist, who I think will probably be the last single minority to be elected. Now, we don't think of atheists as a minority, but they finally got from Barack Obama protections as a protected minority class that you cannot discriminate against. When I was a teacher, I was teaching high school, I had to hide the fact I was an atheist, because if parents found out that a heathen was which of course an atheist and a heathen aren't the same thing, if Ocean's watching, I understand the difference. I get it. But nonetheless, you understand, I think, where I'm going. How much progress has been made since then, do you think? And what more needs to be done?
I think in the United States, what I'm noticing is that more and more people are publicly stating that they're not following any religion. I've seen that there are people who are rethinking religion since 9/11 happened, and then again, it further bolstered it when the Catholic Church, the Vatican, had their child sexual abuse epidemic. And I call it an epidemic because it looks that way to me. And I feel like both groups, leadership, like major figures in both these groups, the Muslim Islamic groups and the Catholic groups, have done a terrible job at responding to these atrocities and have not handled it very smartly. They've basically dug in their heels and refused to capitulate and cooperate with authorities and say, here, what we should do, we're going to handle this, it's an internal matter, we're handling it ourselves. To me, that's an indication that there's a problem, a systemic problem with the organization. So the Catholic Church has probably got a bigger spotlight for this, but when we take a look at things going on with Saudi Arabia and the Islamic State and other organizations, I do believe that Saudi Arabia and Islamic State are much more closely linked than most people realize. That's just my opinion, though. But there's just it's these efforts that are being made to keep religion alive and prominent in society, and and some of them are very subtle, the approaches that are being used, as well as the obvious ones, and different approaches and tactics are used with different countries and even different demographics, because there's a lot of money behind these big organizations, these big organized religions, and they can put a lot of money into researching what the better strategies are to use. And I think this is one aspect that is being unfortunately overlooked a lot. And so people aren't really realizing it. We sort of see things seeping in. Like there's that interview on Bill Maher's show that you had mentioned to me earlier about Sam Harris and Ben Affleck. And Ben Affleck conflating critique of Islam with racism. And so when you used the term Islamophobia earlier, and there are, I acknowledge that there's two different ways this word is used. One way is to conflate with racism and shut down conversation. It's a very manipulative tactic, and Christopher Hitchens hit at that version of it very strongly and very well too. He was very effective at it. But the other one I consider to be the more natural and linguistically correct definition, which is also used. The meaning is that obviously Islam, the religion itself, the collection of ideas that make up the religion, and not specifically the people, the Muslims who adhere to it, and a phobia, which is typically known as an irrational fear. So an irrational fear of some ideas is kind of when I first heard the word, that's what I thought it meant. But then when I saw people misusing it in that manipulative way to shut down discourse, I thought, well, what is going on here? And it took a little bit of looking into it to find out that that's what they meant, and that's what they were doing. So.
All right, we have a $5 super chat from Michael Westby. Michael, thank you very much for your support. Quote, they may be rethinking religion, but they still have their unwavering faith in Jesus Christ and Donald Trump, which seems to be...
Yeah, the U.S.
Yeah.
Yeah, from here, what the U.S. has, it looks to us, from my Canadian perspective, it kind of looks like there's some tie-in to the original Civil War from centuries ago, I guess. When did that Civil War happen? I don't remember the exact date. I'm sure you probably know. But there's... it's as if people didn't want to give that up, because I see Confederate flags being flown in some of the news reporting and whatnot, and it seems to me like the Civil War didn't actually resolve things for a lot of people, and people are still hanging on to that. And when I see people storming the U.S. Capitol on, I guess it was January 6th, that made me feel very sad, because what they're doing is... It looked like a lot of people who don't understand what democracy is supposed to be about, and they're interfering with the process, which is actually, in general, in principle, quite a good process. It may not be the best option in the world for what we're doing, but it's the best one we seem to know and have been able to invent so far. And
it was Churchill. Democracy is the worst form of government, except for every other one.
Except the what?
Except for every other one.
Ah, yeah. Churchill was a very smart guy. A very smart man.
Well, he also said the best argument against democracy is 5 minutes with the average voter.
Yeah, so it's possible. I think he's taken kind of a cynical view there, but I think in a society where there are intrinsic problems with public education, that actually does hold quite true. So, I see that stuff going on in the Capitol there, and it's good that the FBI is tracking down the participants and questioning them and even charging some of them, because they do need to be held responsible for that. But if there's so many people in the country who have such a disdainful attitude toward democratic systems, that indicates to me that there's a much deeper seated problem in society there that isn't being addressed, that really needs to be.
I think that's a good point, and the U.S. was already, before Trump was even elected, was more divided than it had been in any time since the Civil War, and things are definitely getting worse. And I think that would tie into cancel culture and a few other topics. I do want to say I've got the Affleck video queued up. and I wanted to get into it a bit, but I decided we could. We could certainly play some of it. Yeah, sure. Let me play some
I
of
did
that.
mention it, so.
And
I'll say hello to Titan. I see he's there taking care of the chat. He's a great guy.
Yes, he's been around for a bit, and we certainly very much appreciate his work over here. The other thing was actually, and speaking of, because Titan made sure I was aware of this today, which is that today Gallup released a poll that says for the first time since I believe it's since they started tracking this, although they conflated whether it was since they started tracking this or only since they were comparing those numbers to. It was a little confusing, but I think that since the first time they started tracking this, the number of people who go to church is for the first time a minority in the U.S. at 48%. They credited this with less religiosity, and I was just like, "Well, thanks, Gallup. Appreciate that."
Yeah. And I just realized that I only said his first name. I only said Titan's first name. His last name is Uranus.
Oh, Jesus. I am
there. I said his whole name.
I am gonna find a way to get Titan. He does that just to get people to say that on our air, and I would have thought.
I think I handled it okay.
I would have thought certain educated guests would have been above falling for that, but fine.
I didn't. I put a buffer in there. You did notice that, right?
Okay. Oh no, that's not. Well, actually, to tell you the truth, I wanted to point out. I'm really glad you're here, and this is not a joke. This is not a joke. People who have been here since day one will realize this is the first time in quite some time we've been able to say something, which is if there are any problems in production today, it is not my fault. It is not my fault. No matter what happens, it is not the fault of the producer, the host, or anything like that. It is your fault. And the reason why is this. On about the third or fourth day of In Time, when we first started, we decided we had to create an order of blame as to who gets the fault or who gets the blame if anything goes wrong with the show. We figured it would be unfair to blame the hosts and because we got enough to worry about. You shouldn't be blaming us for.
Blame me then. That's fine. I'll volunteer.
But there's a good reason. We decided that if anything goes wrong and you're trying to find out whose fault it is, the blame necessarily must go to the nearest Canadian. Welcome to the show.
Okay. Well, I will apologize in advance.
Well, thank you. Well, and that's still on our Discord. But I don't know what happens when you leave. Then I'm going to be back in trouble again because most of the time it really is my fault. So I need somebody else to blame. So I know
you're just keeping it light. Yeah, that was great.
Well, I'm actually not kidding about the document, but our producer was Canadian, and so we just figured it would blame so we just would like if I did a screw up, would blame him because we're just like he'll apologize anyway, so let's just blame the Canadian. So we wrote this document, and it's still up there, and it basically says you blame the nearest Canadian, and today that's you, and it's been a while, so I'm thrilled. I can do no wrong.
And I was willing to take the blame before you even mentioned this policy.
Oh dear Lord! So all right.
How characteristic, huh?
Like I said, the people who've been around here for a while actually will remember that.
Oh, great TV show! That. Look at that. It's got its own screen. That's fantastic. The way you're presenting.
Listen. Listen. It's like if you really want to get cute about it, let's see. What would we? We could.
Put it in the big screen, where I am.
We could take the time to move it into that center screen right there.
Good. Let's do that. Sure.
Oh, you want to do that?
That looks good.
Sure. I can move it into that.
I think that's a good choice. Yeah.
I think that's a good idea. So let's. You
can show the other options later.
Yeah. Well, of course, this is. This is my favorite view. But everybody else. Our sub count just starts going down when I do this one. I haven't figured out why yet.
It's those cats, maybe.
Yeah. Well, I had a brief stint on Pornhub, but I found out people were paying me more money to keep my clothes on, and now I do this.
I was in a debate a few months ago with a guy who wasn't wearing any pants.
I heard about that.
Yeah. He stood up and walked around, and I missed all of that, and I'm glad I did. Because I was looking at my notes and whatnot, and focused on the questions that are being asked. But people kept telling me about it, and people follow me around in debates and interviews like this, and sometimes make pants jokes in the chat. It's hilarious.
Oh boy, yeah, that's well, and of course, like I told you before, I got my start really on the Non Sequitur show. I was a guest to discuss prisons, and the reason I wear this jacket is because I had made a comment that Kyle Curtis was buying $400 suits because he always had all these very nice coats, and so they decided to call me Nick $400 Soutter. And after that, I said, that's a good one. That's worthy of me wearing the suit. So now I have to wear this every episode since then. But the other thing that most people did not know, and you had to be a bit of an insider to know this, is he was not wearing pants. So first of all, you have to realize that for the most part in every one of those shows, Mr. Curtis was not wearing pants. The other problem is, of course, that means I was way off. He only had to pay about $200 a suit. But
he never stood up, did he?
No, he never stood up. He was smarter than that. He didn't make that mistake. Oh, doggers! I did hear about that.
That'll keep him smiling the whole time while he's on there, isn't it?
Oh, dear Lord!
If only people knew all these years.
Yeah. All right. So what I'm going to do here is, and I want to make sure. So we've, you know what the. Okay. Now, so the audio on this is going to go into the master. It should be okay, but it's been a while since I've done a clip. So if you guys can't hear it, we'll do it again. But for now, let's start this clip out here.
Anyway,
this is a famous clip.
Liberals need to stand up for liberal principles. This is what I said on last week's show. Obviously, I got a lot of hate for it, but all I'm saying is that liberal principles like freedom of speech, freedom to practice any religion you want without fear of violence, freedom to leave a religion, equality for women, equality for minorities, including homosexuals. These are liberal principles that liberals applaud for, but then when you say in the Muslim world this is what's lacking, then they get upset.
Yeah. Well, liberals have really failed on the topic of theocracy. They'll criticize white theocracy. They'll criticize Christians. They'll still get agitated over the abortion clinic bombing that happened in 1984. But when you want to talk about the treatment of women and homosexuals and free thinkers and public intellectuals in the Muslim world, I would argue that liberals have failed us. And the crucial point of confusion, thank you.
Thank God you're here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the crucial point of confusion is that we have been sold this meme of Islamophobia, where every criticism of the doctrine of Islam gets conflated with bigotry toward Muslims as people.
Right.
And that is, it's intellectually ridiculous. Even it gets.
So hold on, are you the person who understands the officially codified doctrine of Islam? You're the interpreter of that, so you can say, well, this is.
I'm actually well educated on this topic.
I'm asking you. So you're saying if I criticize you're saying that Islamophobia is not a real thing. That if you're critical of something,
well, it's not a real thing when we do it.
Right.
Well, no,
it really isn't.
I'm not denying that certain people are bigoted against Muslims as people. And that's a problem.
Big of you.
But
But why are you so hostile about this concept?
It's gross. It's racist.
It's not. But it's so nuts.
It's like saying those stateless, shifty Jew.
You're not listening
Absolutely
to
not.
what we are saying.
You guys are saying if you want to be liberals, believe in liberal principles like freedom of speech, like we are endowed by our forefathers with an inalienable rights, like all men are created equal.
Ben, we have to be able to criticize bad ideas. And
of course we do. No liberal doesn't want to criticize bad ideas.
But Islam at this moment is the mother lode of bad ideas.
Gee.
Stop here for a sec.
Yeah.
So where Sam Harris is saying Islam is the mother lode of bad ideas, it's important to note that he later, very soon after, corrected this publicly and said what he meant to say was Islam is a mother lode of bad ideas. He didn't want to actually mean that it was the only one, and he was kind of reflecting, I think, on how people can get caught up in these kinds of conversations. But that's just a minor point, but I think it's an important one to always point out with this clip.
So I have a theory, which I've mentioned before, and it's not like it's controversial or it's huge, and the theory is that there's a logical fallacy, and someone gave me the non-logical version of it. I've forgotten what it is, but a logical fallacy. It's called affirming the consequent. And in fact, the vast majority of fallacies, in my view, are actually a form of affirming the consequent. Even the fallacy is a form of affirming the consequent if you look at it. And I think affirming the consequent is actually the one that we do the most. But what affirming the consequent is... What?
I've always thought the fallacy sounds redundant to me.
It does. It does. Well, and I was talking about fallacies at one point. We were talking about joke fallacies, and then I started talking about real ones. I mentioned the fallacy, and they thought I was back to joke fallacies. Like, no, that's a real one. That's a real one.
That was my first reaction when I first heard about it too. Yeah.
Well, but okay. So here's the interesting thing. Okay, so what affirming the consequent is, just in a logical form, it's if A then B, and someone gives you B, and then you assume A, which of course you can't do. One example that throws people, which is why I give it first, is where I say, if John is hungry, he will eat. John is eating. What can you assume? What do we therefore know? And people will always say, well, he must be hungry. Well, no, maybe he's got an eating disorder. Maybe he also eats anytime he sees food. Maybe he eats when he gets depressed. You don't know. All I said was, if he's hungry, he'll eat.
Right.
Then when you say he's eating, and then the one that everybody gets, so that one people still struggle with, and they say, that doesn't make sense. How do you know? But then the easy one is, if my car is out of gas, it won't start. My car won't start. So what do I know? Nothing, because there are many other reasons my car might not. Maybe it's out of gas. Maybe it's out of the ignition's dead. So yeah.
This is one of the challenges with common speech, is that very often statements like that can come across as exclusive in nature, but really they're not.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and so this is what happened here, of course. And just to quickly hit the fallacy. In any case where somebody is, if you're making a logical argument, in any case where somebody is wrong, presumably you will find a fallacy in their argument. Either that or one of the premises is false, but you understand the basic, there will be a fallacy somewhere. In any case where somebody is arguing the wrong thing, their argument is flawed, you will find a fallacy. If you find a fallacy, therefore, I guess their argument's wrong. Now, so the fallacy is actually affirming the consequent. So, so it's actually, it is. It just is. It's already accounted for in affirming the consequent. It's nice to have a separate, but a fallacy is affirming the consequent. That's all it is. And what they do here, and what happens here, of course, is he says that it is impossible to criticize Islam without being called racist. That was essentially his argument. And Ben Affleck says, well, wait a minute.
Yeah.
So there's no such thing as racism because, it's impossible to be racist towards Islam? No, there's legit racism, but just because somebody's criticizing doesn't mean it's racist. So you could actually see him make and then latch on like, he wasn't playing.
I'm laughing at where you paused the video because Bill Maher looks like he's ready to jump up and get the heck out of Dodge right now.
No. But did one of our mods literally suggest a guest should take off their pants? The quality of this, the integrity and the.
I told you why that's coming up.
Just invited someone to take off their pants.
Well, they won't be.
Good night. Thank you so much. I appreciate you coming. I think that's the show.
Maya, I know. Maya Adkisson, she's wonderful. She's a lot of fun. I'm very encouraging. I really appreciate what she's doing. But I can at least partly satisfy her because I am barefoot. I am wearing pants, but I'm barefoot.
I'm glad it stopped there. I am relieved more than you know. So where we're okay.
Yeah. So she won't be completely dissatisfied, I hope. So, but with Ben Affleck, though, what he's saying about the racism charge, that's part of that defective misdefinition of Islamophobia that's been spread around and pushed and meant to shut down conversation. And you see how effective it is at closing down conversation here, because he brings that up. And now Sam Harris has to explain that's nothing to do with racism. Now, Bill Maher made a really good attempt to say right away, he nipped that in the bud and said, no, that's not. But it results in people still having to explain themselves. And where I think it's partly coming from as well is the Muslim extremists who probably came up with it might be comparing with how Judaism was denoted as an actual race, I believe, in the Supreme Court of the USA at one point, recognized that way. So they want, more than anything, to have the same designation. they can't have it because there are so many different races in Islam. In China, there are Muslims who are Chinese. In Africa, there are Muslims who are completely black, and then there are white Muslims in North America and the UK, and all over the world. It's all mixed all over the place. I don't think that there is racism coming from these religions, but I do think I don't want to ignore the fact that there are some racist groups that are identifying themselves with religion being a very important part of it, like the KKK being a Christian organization and whatnot. So there's stuff like that. So this is unfortunate, and I wonder if Ben Affleck before this show was being primed or misled by one of these manipulative people who knew he would be on with Sam Harris and wanted to get this issue to come up, so they maybe primed him for this, or he's just looking at the wrong sources. I'm not sure.
Well, he clearly was loaded for bear. I mean, as soon as he Sam Harris said, I forget what he said, but as soon as he started talking about it, he was like, "Wow,
that's why I suspect that."
Yeah. It's like, whoa, who?
But that's why I suspect that. Yeah, that's exactly why I suspected that. First time I saw this clip.
Yep. No, I think. Well, it's unfortunate because I think Sam Harris had some very good points, and I don't. It's fun to hate on Ben Affleck for all these reasons that I think, really, for the most part, aren't particularly fair.
And the biggest problem with that Islamophobia term is it's getting applied. There's a conflation between what is the follower of the religion called and the name of the religion itself. And in the case of Islam, it's a Muslim and Islam. They're two different things. A Muslim is a person who practices Islam and believes in Allah and worships Muhammad and whatnot. But when it comes to Islam itself, it's a collection of ideas. It is a religion. It is an ideology. And in case of Islam, it's also a political system and attempts to be a legal system. They have Sharia and all these things built into it. Christianity didn't have it to the extent that Islam did originally. And so, and I do think that religion's part of the purpose initially is to kind of set guidelines for people to follow certain rules and all conform so they can get some sense and sensibility in society. It was probably originally an early attempt at providing a moral guideline and even some kind of a legal system without really people understanding the concept of what a legal system should be. I think we have a much better idea today, but it's still a debated topic. And we have the fundamental principles of justice. We have human rights code. We have equality and fairness. So we have John Rawls' theory of justice and the veil of ignorance that's used by lawmakers, which is probably one of the most important intellectual tools we have today for ensuring that, at least trying to make sure that our laws are more fair and just for people. There's still a lot that we need to do to improve our systems, but what we have here in Canada and even in the US and in other countries, I think is far superior to anything that Sharia Islam can provide. So when it comes to, this is about the discussion of ideas, we value freedom here. And one of the problems I've encountered is when I've spoken to various Muslims that I've found out that a lot of them have a misunderstanding of freedom. They think that freedom, and they tell me this directly, freedom within the confines of what Allah will allow. So it's almost as if the word was purposely mistranslated to English, freedom. So when people start coming to our cultures here with that are English language centric, and they hear the word freedom, they're not thinking freedom in the terms we are. They're thinking it within the confines of Allah, and then there's a bit of a misstep here. And so I think when it comes to immigration, we need to have some kind of a more thorough introduction to some of these basic concepts about how our justice system works, how important freedom is, and what freedom is, and things like that. So when people come into our society, they don't have such a shock. They know what to be prepared for and what to expect and what to do. They'll be welcome to do, And I think that's a part that we're missing in Western civilization. They're talking about liberals here, and the definition of liberals kind of seems to vary. Like here in Canada, what is a liberal is somebody who's very much in favor of freedom and not censorship. But I hear a lot of Americans tell me that, not all, but quite a few have told me that liberals are pro-censorship. And it just seems to be that this is a very murky word, and I'm not sure what your thought is on what they mean by liberal here.
Well, I'd like to answer that. There's a whole bunch of places I'd like to go, including No True Scotsman, because what makes a Christian and or Muslim, which was something that Affleck brought up. But I have two. I have
an answer to that, by the way.
No True Christian Scotsman. Okay, I'm looking forward to that. Sinister Porpoise, $2. I don't wear pants when I stream. Skirts now. And I was just like, oh, finally, a good answer. And now Porpoise wants to start the
that was brilliant.
Wants to turn In Time into the pantless solipsist society. You have no idea. We are overrun with solipsists, which really sounds like a non sequitur, but apparently it seems to have happened. Or use solipsist jokes on our. I'll tell. Yeah. Well, let me get Jake 4D real quick, which is $5. Jake 4. So thank you, Sinister, very much. We appreciate it. Also, Jake, we really appreciate $5. Due to the way language works, most fallacious statements are covered by multiple fallacies, which is, of course, true. But I think, like I said earlier, it may be beneficial to have like sub fallacies, like again the fallacy as a subset of affirming the consequent. But I think I do think that's absolutely true, and I think that's going to be different overlapping ones depending on the argument. But having said that, it seems to me at least some fallacies are really just copies of the other. But I think that's a good point.
Yeah. Fellow who's had me on his YouTube channel twice already. His name's David Worley, and I can remember the episode numbers because I jokingly the first time told him.
I know David well.
Yeah. I took. I made a joke about how about episode number 42 as it was coming up. He said okay, and then answered life, universe, and everything, and then he slated in me for number 142 after that. So it was hilarious, but. He has published a book about fallacies, and it's quite good. It's getting good reviews, and we even promote it from the Atheist Frontier website. So I highly recommend looking up David Worley's name in the Amazon bookstore and finding it if for people who want to get a good understanding of these different fallacies.
I think I was number 47 if I remember correctly. That was quite some time ago, though. But
howdy, neighbor.
Yeah, hey. So. But
just a few doors down.
Must have been up. Yeah, this was a while ago, so I don't. But I remember that one I thoroughly. And then we had him on because, of course, did he step into it? He had the interview with there was a brand new anti-theist convention that had sort of paid off really a whole bunch of. And he interviewed the guy who showed up drunk and then basically sexually harassed him.
He was drunk? I missed the part about him being drunk. I watched that.
He was under the influence of something. It is in my view. So let me reiterate. Let me be a little clearer. It is my view and the view of the hosts of In Time at the time when we interviewed Worley, and the view of Worley too, if I recall, that he was under the influence of something because he was having considerable difficulties maintaining any kind of coherent sentence, and he ended up he would babble nonsensically. He would. Lose track of his topic, and then just the way he approached them, what he said, it's like, well, when you come to this convention, I'm going to put my hand on your knee, and I'm going to sexually harass you. And it's like,
yeah, see that to me, and I told David Worley this at the time. To me, that looks like a threat to commit sexual assault.
I don't think it looks like. I think it is.
But that's what I told David, and David's like at first, oh really? He wasn't quite sure about that. Then more and more people kind of coming up with the same thing, and good for him doubting me at first. That's the right rational thing to do, and question it and really think about it, and he did. I give a lot of credit to David Worley for that. So I was very disappointed in that, and I thought that's just I don't feel sorry for them having to cancel the conference, and that people left. People don't want anything to do with it. People left. They didn't want to do it, and I was really hoping David's conference would come through because he felt inspired to.
Yeah.
do his own. Yeah, and I hope he does get that going. You know, I don't know if he actually had one of those conferences yet, but I really hope that he can do it and that it is a big success for him. He deserves it. And I just wanted to say hi to. Go ahead.
No, that same conference nominated me for Atheist of the Year. So well, yeah, you say that, but of course, you know.
Congratulations.
After all the things started, it was sort of like, and it was everybody else who had been nominated bailed, so it was basically like I was going to win by fiat. And I had talked to David about it because he had wanted me to bail as well for obvious and very good reasons. I decided I was going to stay in, and on the grounds that if I bail, I can't voice my opinion. But if I accept an award, I get to stand up in front of that mic and I can address absolutely everybody there. And if I do it right, there's not much they can do about it. As long as I'm not like hostile and offensive and I use language properly, I can say anything I want to there, and everybody is going to have a pretty good idea of. I was like, if I bail on this, I lose the only platform I have to criticize it, other than joining. And you know, Shannon Q did lots of stuff, but these are all people who are in opposition to it and do so from the outside. Like, I'm not turning down an invitation. And that may still not have been the wisest idea, but I gave some examples of, and then it eventually became a moot point because the whole thing was done anyway. But it was, that was not a pleasant month for anybody, I think.
Well, the fact that David Worley came on your show later is, I think, a very good sign. So, and I just want to say hi to Sinister. So, go ahead.
No, please, you go. I've cut you off a couple times.
I just wanted earlier to say hello to Sinister Porpoise. Porpoise, thank you for tuning in here. And Sinister Porpoise is, I think, making a playable video game and has some videos on her channel about that. So, and she had me on her show as well once and had a good time on there. She's did a great interview. So, yeah, well, if she's got a good channel going.
If one of our mods could maybe snag a link to Porpoise's Discord and drop that in, she's put. I'm on her Discord, and she has put a
YouTube as well, if possible. Yeah.
To her game on the drop it on our in the live chat on YouTube. Yeah. And just
it's one of those two-dimensional isometric tile games. I love those kind of games, and it's so cool to see that getting developed. You know, so it's just I really like that. So
well, and she has a lot of experience.
Development's going well.
There's a lot of experience in journalism, so that's not all that far afield from what we do, and we've on occasion done some kind of journalism work, so we appreciate having her around, and she livens up the chat with solipsist jokes. So,
are you sure that's not you doing that? All of us? That'd be,
you know what?
That joke didn't go well.
You know what, smartass? Okay, so here it is. Here it is. You asked for it. This is your fault. Again, Joe, I mean, it's going to be your fault anyway, right? But
I apologized in advance, so I'm in the clear.
Here it is. No, you're not. You got to keep apologizing. It's not a one-time thing. How many Hail Marys?
I'm Canadian. I can afford it.
Okay. Solipsist. Let's see if I can remember this. Solipsist, deontologist, and utilitarian walk into a bar. Utilitarian goes up to the bar to the barkeep and says, okay, barkeep, I'll take a round and a round for everybody, please. Drinks the round and says, let's toast to the best possible outcome for the most people. Okay, great. The deontologist comes up and says, please get everybody a drink. And he lifts his drink and he says, to always doing the right thing. And the solipsist says, I'll take a drink, takes the drink, good, drinks it down, done. And the deontologist and the utilitarian go up to the solipsist and say, Jesus, aren't you going to buy everybody here a drink? And he goes, I just did.
Oh, that's clever. You tell that well. That was really good.
So, all right. So now we had talked about, this
is
there's a couple of issues that I do want to hit, and I think we could keep going on. So we're going to have you. Actually, we are having you back. We're having you back in 2 weeks.
Great.
We're gonna, and so that's already booked. So thank you for that. But so there's a whole bunch more I do want to get into, and I'll just hit some of the broader strokes, and we can figure out where we're going to go. This is going organic, and I think that's the best way to do it. But I do want to get into.
We're going to continue with the video at hand, right?
Yep, we can absolutely do that. But just sort of as the broader strokes and things that either we can work in, or you know what, if it's in 2 weeks, we hit it in 2 weeks. But you know, your organization seems to act a bit more as an atheist organization. So what's the difference between, say, an atheist one and an anti-theist one? How important is anti-theism?
That one's easy to answer.
And then the other one that I definitely want to get into is the no true Scotsman argument, and how do we know, like when you say, are you a real Christian or are you a real Muslim? So many Muslims say you're not a real Muslim if you're not willing to die for the religion. So many Christians say you're not a real Christian if you don't take communion or if you don't say the sinner's prayer. You know, Southern Baptists think, and it was the Dillahunty gave, I think, the best line on this ever. I love this. He said, if you want to know what's wrong with Christianity, just ask a, if you want to know what's wrong with Judaism, just ask a Christian. You want to know what's wrong with Christianity, ask a Mormon. You want to know what's wrong with Mormonism, ask a Muslim. If you want to know what's wrong with Catholics, ask a Protestant. If you want to know what's wrong with Protestant, ask a Calvinist, all the way down. If you want to know what's wrong with the First Baptist Church of Memphis, ask the Second Baptist Church of Memphis. So, you know, and what I like is there are 3,000 mutually excommunicative sects of Christianity. These are sects that do not recognize the other sects as being saved, which is to say that they say that instead of saying that they think the others are going to hell. If you're not saved, you're going to hell. Oh, I don't think they're going to hell. Are they saved? No. So they're going. Where are they going?
And I'm aware of 99 different denominations of Islam. Shia and Sunni and Wahhabi and Ismaili are only 4 of them. There's a lot. There's Sufis as well. The list goes on. And there's a whole bunch of sects people haven't even heard of. And there's one sect that's out in the desert bordering Africa, I believe, it's the men cover their faces instead of the women.
Ooh. All right,
So,
well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to hit play. I am going to have to go for a second, but I have ear pieces, so I can hear anywhere I go. I can go 300 yards, so this is great. I can go check my mail and still be in the show. Okay. So I'm going to hit play, and I'll be back in less than a minute. So
Sounds good.
Perfect.
So we have
That's just a fact.
like blasphemy.
It's an ugly thing.
Apostasy.
It is.
One basic liberal
Let me
principle
unpack
is
it.
tolerance.
Let me unpack
But
it.
not for
No,
intolerance.
of course not. But the picture you're painting is, to some extent, true, but is hugely incomplete. It is certainly true that plenty of fanatics and jihadis are Muslim, but the people who are standing up to them, Malala, Muhammad Ali Dadak in Iran, in prison for 9 years for speaking up for Christians. A friend that I had in Pakistan who was shot this year, Rashid Rahman, for defending people accused of apostasy.
Or how about the more than 1 billion people who aren't
Muslims
fanatical, who don't punch women, who just want to go to the store,
Wait a second. Wait a
don't do any of the things that you're saying all Muslims.
Wait a second.
Stereotyping.
Wait a second.
And you're painting the whole religion with that.
No, let's get down to who has the right answer here. 1 billion people, you say. All these billion people don't hold any of those don't hold these pernicious beliefs? I would. Well, that's just not true, Ben. That's just not true.
Now, this is one of the, and I am getting, all of a sudden, oh, that may be you. I'm getting a little, I think you may have moved your mic again because I'm getting a little background noise there. Oh, much better. Thank you. So, here's the interesting, when I first saw that Pew study, and I've got it here, and among other things, it talks about, sort of the basics. Do you think that abortion is immoral? Do you think drinking alcohol is immoral? But then it gets into some, is it okay to kill civilians? Is suicide bombing justifiable or not? And the numbers were so astonishingly high that I really questioned the entire study at first. And the reason I questioned the study was because I was just like, this isn't, no. I've met a lot of Muslims. This is nothing like any Muslim I've met. And but then, of course, what I had forgotten, and this is the point that Sam Harris eventually makes, and he references this study, but what I had forgotten was that they're westernized here. And I know that people say that you'll never be able to integrate the cultures, but plenty of Muslims in the U.S. are westernized, and they may still hold reasonably extreme views for the U.S., but they're not. And to be fair, there was that nightclub shooting that was a Muslim. But having said that, the vast majority of shootings in the U.S. is an older white guy. So, what you find is, Ben Affleck said 1 billion.
Statistical.
Yeah, I think 1 billion is a little high. But what the issue is this, which is the vast majority of Muslims do not live in Western countries, including the U.S., the U.K., Canada. The vast majority live in the Middle East, and they live under Sharia caliphates, and many of them, while we find these oppressive, and I think they are, many of the people there, and it was also in the study, do you wish to live under a caliphate? And the vast majority said yes. Now, it gets difficult to know, whether government's monitoring, can they do this? And there were many places in which they could not actually take this study could not be given because the countries were so oppressive, they wouldn't allow Westerners there to even they wouldn't allow even an intermediary. No, you may not ask our citizens any questions. But of the ones that would, you got back these huge extremist answers, which does constitute the bulk of, at least at the time, and I would suspect now still, but at a minimum at the time, Muslims on the planet. So it looks like you were going to say something. Again, your fan seems to have kicked on a bit. So okay, perfect. Thank you.
So one of the biggest problems I see with what Ben Affleck just said, and the same problem exists with these studies. They talk about Muslims worldwide, and they talk about Christians worldwide. But when you get down to the different denominations, it's not it's not 1.4 billion Muslims anymore, and it's not X number of Christians anymore. You divide them into the denominations where they do have disparate views on certain things, like Sunni and Shia. For example, I know that there's a number of different fundamental differences between them, and some of it gets down to really simple things like how do they bow, with their hands on their chest, or with the hands down on their thighs, on their sides, just below their waist. And there was one Muslim that I met here years ago at a job, and we were talking about, he was telling me about this stuff. He believed that Islam was going to take over and rule the whole world. It's just a matter of time. It takes longer in democracies, but it'll happen here too, yada, yada. He had that kind of view. And
I've heard that,
no, I've heard it from multiple, actually, and not just people I've met in person. It is an attitude that's out there. And I would say it's for more of the extremists and also more of the firm believers, the ones who are very strongly indoctrinated into it, who will express these kinds of things. But yeah, his parents, one was Sunni and the other was Shia. And so when he goes to the mosques here, he'll purposely bow the wrong way. And just because it lights people up. And so I asked him, if you were in Iran or Saudi Arabia, which his two parents were from, would he do the same thing there? He says, oh, I wouldn't dare. Yeah. And the reason is because he'd be in huge trouble under Sharia there for it. So, this told me a lot about, he's getting to enjoy the freedom here, freedom of expression, that he can't enjoy back in places that really are run caliphate-like under Sharia. And he wants it here, and yet he's having fun doing this. Like, it just seemed
it does seem
almost surreal to me.
There's a disconnect, but okay. Yeah.
It was an interesting thing, yeah. And he said, he did say if when Sharia gets in here, he won't be able to do this anymore here. He's very sure about it. So he's enjoying it while he can. And I thought, wow, you're enjoying freedom while you can. He's the same guy who told me about how in Saudi Arabia they have something like the DEA. So I jokingly called it the Pork Enforcement Agency, the PEA. They have people there are people apparently in Saudi Arabia and other Islamic run regimes where it's very strongly Sharia, that they're selling pork on the black market, bacon and other forms. And there are two types of people selling it apparently. There's some who really are trying to make money at it, and those ones taste really good. And then there's the others who are trying to sabotage it, some suspected to be government agents, who are making it taste really awful. So it's like... Yeah, it's like, holy cow, this is like, there's a lot going on here. But, when I look at all this and I think, gee, you've got these religions are being basically proclaimed to be more important than people. Ideas are not more important than people. People are more important than ideas. And when ideas are made to be more important than people, then in the long term, you end up seeing this kind of effect happening, especially under an authoritarian dictatorship kind of regime. So that's kind of one of the outcomes, right, that bubbles out. There's lots of different problems that bubble out of that kind of stuff, and this is kind of one of the lesser problems, but it is still an issue, right? So
I think you and I have a lot of very similar ideas and approaches. I may be a little more extreme than you, probably not by much, because I still believe in doing sort of anti-theism work in a very specific way. I obviously would like to have, and this was another thing, in the United States there are 8 states in which the Constitution...
Can you just advance Ben Affleck's picture here a couple of frames?
Yeah,
this is a terrible look for him.
Oh, well, you know, it's closed the wrong. I thought that was the third camera. Closed you and...
No, don't close it. Just advance a couple of frames. This is a nicer looking picture.
All right, I can do that. So, let's see. There we go.
There we go. That works.
All right. So, there are 8 states in which it is, according to the Constitution, it is illegal for somebody who does not believe to, and you know what? I should actually read the Texas one.
I've heard of it. They have to be. They can't be an atheist and run for office. I've heard that.
Well, actually, they can be an atheist and run. They just can't be an atheist and win. And that may sound like a distinction without a difference, but no, it says they can't.
No, it's a big one.
Yeah, it is, because Aaron Ra, of course, ran, but if he had won, it would have violated the Texas Constitution for the Secretary of State or whoever to certify that win. And everybody said, well, of course they'll just do it. I was like, they're not going to just do it. This is Texas, and B, it's against the state constitution. It doesn't matter. There's supremacy in the federal constitution. So, yeah.
2 things to say about it. One is, this is almost like a trap. It's leaving it open for atheists to waste money doing something that they can't win at. But in a way, it's also good that that's allowing atheists to run, because imagine if he did get elected, and then they tell him they're not going to let him go because he's an atheist. Can you say constitutional challenge?
Well, and by the time you did the challenge, okay, now hold on. Amendment.
Wouldn't matter. He'd be doing the challenge, and he'd be, and it would be massive, big-time news in the U.S.
Well, and the amount of money that he'd have to pay for it is Fourth Amendment to the United States. When it good faith amendment to the. I'm not actually finding it here, so it's the fourth. I want to get a link because I actually want to read it. I'm
going to guess that the Freedom from Religion. I'm going to guess that the Freedom from Religion Foundation would probably try to help him out with that challenge.
Well, and people said that the ACLU would, and they may or may not. I don't know, and I'm sure that they would too.
Well, the ACLU probably would too. Yeah.
Article 4 of Texas Constitution. As I recall, it was Article 4. I'd be really surprised if. It keeps getting me Article 4 of the...
That'd be worldwide news, actually.
All right, here we go. Okay, here it is. So, this is a state constitution, which admittedly, we have slavery in our constitution, so, the constitutions are old and out of date, but this is it. Religious tests, and I love this, too, because when I said this, people would read it, and they'd say, Nick, it says the exact opposite of what you're saying. I was like, no, it doesn't. Like, Nick, you're an idiot, and that's not what it says. I said, did you read it? They said, yes. I said, no, you didn't. I read it. No, you did not. So let's read it. No religion. Okay, so here it is. Section 4. Dear Lord, no religious test shall ever be required as a qualification to hold any office or public trust in this state, nor shall one be excluded from holding office on account of their religious sentiments, provided they acknowledge the existence of a supreme being.
Where are the commas?
It's the commas. It's that. I've made this argument. And of course, people just read the first line, and they're like, no, it says you can be any religion. I was like, finish the sentence. Finish the sentence.
Or did they use semicolons?
It was a comma. It was a comma. Oh yeah, but all right. So now we have.
I think that the Second Amendment, the Second Amendment suffers from some of this kind of problem too with the writing style. So.
Oh yeah, I used to watch The West Wing, which I love very much. It was a Aaron Sorkin show, and at one point they discovered that there is this that they can't tell if there's a comma. And somebody notices that in different versions of the Constitution, there's a comma in one clause and there isn't on another, and it has to do with. It ends up being with part of takeage, which is the takeage, which is where the eminent domain, and how that works. And so, like, oh dear Lord! So they said, well, why don't you just go to the Constitution? They said, well, I did go to the Constitution to read the original. I was like, what? It's like there's a smudge there. There's a smudge. So like, yeah, there's a smudge. A smudge of law.
Sabotage!
It's a smudge of law, so I just love that's going to be my from now on. It's a smudge of law.
Oh, that's hilarious.
So,
and it's terrible too. What such a small detail in that can seem pedantic to many is actually very important in these things.
Oh Jesus, yeah. Well, again, it's the law of it's not the law of averages, but a law of large numbers. You know, you can have something that seems innocuous, and you know, I argue this with a lot of religious people, and they just dismiss it, and they're like, well, you know, so what? Like, just fight it in law, you'll win. Fight it in court, you'll win. I was like, you probably would win, but I don't have the cash to fight it in court. Yeah, maybe places will help me out if I'm lucky.
It might, unless the judge doesn't support the Oxford comma, and then you could have problems still.
Well, that's normally why the Oxford comma is so important. But in this case, it doesn't necessarily help. You have a dangling modifier either way. That was Obama. So the Associated Press style book does not allow for the Oxford comma. You cannot use an Oxford comma in Associated Press. Chicago Book of Style you can. AP you may not. This was important when on a tweet.
Damn you, Associated Press.
Yeah, I know exactly, right?
Grandpa's in big trouble now.
They're Nazis.
Let's eat, Grandpa. Commas save lives. Let's eat, Grandpa. Commas save lives. Come on, Associated Press.
So
respect Grandpa.
Yeah, I know exactly. Well, so there was a famous tweet from the Associated Press which said Obama, what was it? Obama to discuss Obama Castro handshake discuss. No, Jesus! Oh, no, I'm gonna lose it. It was Obama set to discuss Obama Castro handshake and gay marriage discussion, but without the Oxford comma, the gay marriage appeared to apply to. It was gay marriage date set, so it appeared to suggest that Obama and Castro were getting married, and all you needed was an Oxford comma on you to fix the problem. But no. So, anyways, so now we've got. I did want to talk a bit about. So, I've encountered a lot of anti-theists who oppose. They say they oppose anything irrational. Religion is irrational. Ergo, I have a number of problems with that point of view. Not the least of which is we all do irrational things, and in fact, if you want to get into Hume's problem of induction, we cannot function without some irrational assumptions. Cannot be done. Period. End of discussion. And when I get into those anti-theists, I say, well, here's the reality.
Hume's point is easy to prove. Lord of the Rings is a story. Without the capability, without the ability to think irrationally, creativity is squelched.
Oh, that's a really good point. Wow.
I just came up with it now.
I really like that. I really like that one. I'm going to have to think about that. I think you're right. I think you're right because you have to be able to suspend.
Feel free to quote me. I just came up with it now. I just came up with it on your show now.
That's a really good one because you have to be able to suspend your own disbelief. You have to be able to work outside the fact that you're not in that reality. And if you cannot do that, I really like that one. We're gonna discuss that one again.
Let's do it.
Well, of course, I'm a writer too, so that's in particular. Suspension of disbelief is a huge issue. But and I get one thing that I realize it happens especially in the U.S. I don't know if it happens anywhere else, especially on social media and of all the media, especially Twitter, which is well known for its ability for in-depth discussions, nuance. I'm just fucking with you. At any rate, I
didn't even realize.
We have a regular here, Christopher Monty, and he's gonna kill me if he ever sees this clip. Christopher Monty, and he said that Twitter is a nuance killing machine, which I think is really true. But what I find is that I think a lot of I have found it seems to me that there are people who are atheists, and then they see Christopher Hitchens and they say, "Oh wow, you mean it's acceptable to get into arguments with people about this shit? I'm going to become an anti-theist just so I can beat up on people." And then they go on Twitter and they run around beating people over the head with it. Yeah.
I don't think the intention is to go around and beat people up. I really don't. Maybe it is for a small number, but I've noticed, like, over time, it seems to be now that there's more of a separation in anti-theist circles. There's the type of anti-theist who are just against the belief in deities, or they're against the idea that people are believing in them. And then there's the anti-religious aspect. And so the anti-religion thing seems to be drifting off into its own separate category now. So there's anti-religious and anti-theist, whereas in the past those two used to be one and the same. So I'm finding this more and more with anti-theists I've been speaking to, and I don't just interact with people online. I'm dealing with people in real life with the organization I run. And so when people come along and claim that I'm an internet atheist or a YouTube atheist or something, I just dismiss those terms because it just doesn't make any sense. You know, it's my work isn't just focused on there. Like there's a new volunteer I was just talking with yesterday who has a whole bunch of wonderful ideas on things to do with Canadian atheists, and we're going to incorporate quite a bit of that into our organization in the near future, and I'm really looking forward to this. So it's great. This is somebody who I'm talking to in real life, not just on the internet, you know. Yeah, sure, we're connected on the internet as well, but yeah, these are real things need to happen. There was, just before I started the organization, there was already a petition on in Canada here to remove one of the laws in our country. And the law was about blasphemous libel, and it could yield a prison term and a number of years in prison, or both. A prison term and a fine up to, I think, $100,000. It was, if I'm remembering correctly, it was a high amount.
Was this because of Stephen Fry, or was that because Stephen Fry?
No, it had nothing to do with him.
Okay.
No. This is Canada. So here we had this in our criminal code on our legal system. Criminal code is a federal set of laws. There's hundreds of laws in there about what's illegal, all kind of like assaulting people, child pornography, exceeding certain driving issues, but most of that's Motor Vehicle Act, handled more provincially or municipally, but there's a few basic things in the criminal code for that: stealing, theft over $1,000, all kinds of different things in there. And blasphemous libel was in the 300s somewhere, as I recall. And so, of course, I signed the petition, and then I started promoting the petition here amongst everybody I knew, and even religious friends of mine signed it because, yeah, they don't want the restriction because they want to be able to blaspheme other religions, or they're okay with people committing blasphemy against their own. They're actually okay with it because they like the Canadian value of freedom of expression. They'd rather know what people are thinking about it. Just like me, I'd rather know that this is what this person's views are instead of censoring them. And that leads into the cancel culture a little bit. You're just thinking that, aren't you?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm thinking. Please continue.
So the cool thing about this petition was we had number one province that had, like you have states in the U.S. here, we have provinces and territories. You can kind of compare them that way, but they're the biggest group of voters in favor of this petition was in Ontario. And then the next largest group was Quebec. And then number third spot was British Columbia, where I am. And I got all these people interested, and they're sharing it with others and spreading it around. And then BC moved up to second place. And I was thinking, can I get it up to first place? That would be awesome. But Ontario stayed in the lead. So, but we got moved up to second place. But it was a small margin that we beat Quebec by. But we did move up a spot, which was kind of cool. It did get 3 readings in our Parliament and then in our Senate, and finally got royal assent, so the law got removed from our legal system, which was great. But nobody, as far as I know, has ever been charged under that blasphemous libel law in the last 100 years. So it was pretty easy for Senate to say, let it go. And one point I'll just make here, when people talk about anti-blasphemy laws, very often they'll call it a blasphemy law. To me, freedom of expression is a blasphemy law. An anti-blasphemy law is censorship. So.
Interesting. Oh. Okay, so well, and now you touched on an argument that I've made before, which is we have reached this point where it's like people who have bad ideas should be shouted down and should not be given a platform to speak. And I do
should be shouted down. Who says that?
Who that should be shouted down?
Yeah, who's saying that?
Oh Jesus! I'm gonna find.
Oh, it's not you. Okay.
Oh no, it's not me. Oh dear Lord, it's not me.
Okay.
Oh, so
good. I don't have to rake you over the coals for that.
But it's a common.
I'm kidding, of course.
I'm gonna agree to is that in the U.S. there's a very profound misunderstanding of our Constitution and the idea that the freedom of speech means that that private platforms have to platform you, and that's really not true. And I don't want it to be true.
That's funny.
So, oh Jesus, you see it all the time. Well, and that happened. The most famous one I can think of is when Miss USA in the Miss USA pageant came out with some pretty some pretty homophobic rhetoric, and then lost her crown. And then she said, well, wait a minute,
about this. Yeah.
This is a violation of my right to free speech. And it's like, no, the right to free speech just means the government can't shut your ass up. But the guy who, if you have the recipe to Coca-Cola and you decide you're going to start spreading that around, and there's going to be some consequences.
Big time, yeah.
Yeah. So, and you can still be held liable for violating contracts and private contracts. And if you have a contract with Coca-Cola, yes, I'm going to help you make your Coke. You have to give me the recipe to do it. You give me the recipe, but there's going to be like an NDA. You violate the NDA, they can enforce that. So it's got nothing to do with your right to free speech. So it's amazing how uneducated, unfortunately, Americans are when we get into this. And I found the vast majority of something like, in my experience, 30 to 40% of Americans I discuss free speech with understand that concept, and 80% of Canadians understand the U.S. concept. I really get upset. Oh, speaking of this,
80%? That's what you. Wow. Okay, that's. I'm glad to hear that.
With. Well, now keep in mind the ones who like either only speak French or who don't go out and engage with Americans who are going to be ones that aren't interested. I mean, there's going to be a selection bias because the only ones who are going to want to talk to me are going to be interested in American culture in some way or another. But it is still nonetheless true that most Canadians I've met understand U.S. laws better than, and we've had multiple times when we need a political correspondent for breaking news, and we go to a Canadian because they know it better. And it's breaking U.S. news.
It shouldn't be that way.
Yeah, tell me about it.
It shouldn't be this way.
Oh, by the way,
it really shouldn't be this way.
Is Canada accepting refugees? I'm asking for a friend.
We get this question so much, especially just after Trump got elected. There were so many people wanting to find how to immigrate to Canada, and when it's finally backed off and seems to have died down is now that Trump is no longer in power. We see this distinct pattern here. I see it with people contacting the Canadian atheists. I see it with people just contacting me because I'm Canadian. And there's other people I know who are running into this too. Right? So, as far as immigration from other countries is concerned, the pace hasn't changed. I've got clients who do immigration for a living. They're lawyers who do the immigration, and they're not noticing any difference from any of the other countries, but they have seen an increase in demand from the U.S., just like I've seen. So, yeah.
And we got a $2 super chat from Jake 4D. Every possible action blasphemes against at least one religion. That's I suspect that's probably true.
That's interesting. I like that.
Yeah, I think that's a very good, and I think that dovetails into about half a dozen things too. But I think he's got a point there. And it's a shame we don't. Yes, please.
There's a shame we don't have what?
It's a shame we don't have Vox. Vox is one of the co-hosts of In Time, and she is often in the co-host seat next to me. She was unavailable for a few weeks. I think she'll be back by the time you return. But Vox does believe in at least I think I want to be a little careful because she should obviously give her own opinions. But my understanding of her position is to absolutely deplatform certain forms of speech in an effort to really protect society. So she makes a very good argument. Vox does not make stupid or bad arguments, but
I'd like to hear her argument because I don't agree.
I can arrange it. I mean, my view is that the marketplace of free ideas is very real, and it is so far the best marketplace and the best way we have. It is natural selection for ideas, and
yeah,
I
that
think,
makes sense.
Yeah, and so what you end up doing is. What got me thinking about it, because I just want to finish this, was people always say, talk about the KKK, and I'm very much for their right to protest and to go down the street, and there's a number of reasons for it. But one of the biggest reasons is, that way I know who all the assholes are. And even if they're wearing hoods, and even if I'm not necessarily going to know who they are, and I'm not a fan of, you shouldn't just go rip off the hood and then blast it all over social media, but at least I know how many there are. I know how much the idea is gaining traction. I know so much more about these bad ideas, these toxic and dangerous people, when they're allowed to talk. And when you look at all the major shooters in the U.S., especially the one of the worst ones, which was the Texas A&M shooting, and in the video that he recorded, nobody heard me. Now you're going to hear me now. You're going to hear me now. So when they don't feel heard, and that's what happened in it was, speaking of Lord of the Rings. Where did they shoot that? They shot it on the island that they shot Lord of the Rings on. No, it's not Norway. It's right off of Australia.
That's okay.
New Zealand.
It's in a beautiful place.
Yeah, in New Zealand, the mass shooting that happened in New Zealand. That's what they said too. They said, "I've been warning people about Muslims, and nobody would let me talk." When people stop talking, that's when the violence starts.
This is, and that's, I use a metaphor to describe the problem here, because you nailed it. And the thing is, if people are forbidden to express themselves, and we see this all the time in countries where people are restricted, and there's large underground movements in some of these places when it starts to really bother a lot of people. So they'll go underground, and they'll build their echo chambers, and their echo chambers will be secure from outsiders hearing anything. So nobody will have any clue that this is bothering anybody. And we'll all go about our daily lives. And like a pressure cooker, one day it will explode because nobody's opening it. And boom, and when that happens, then it's much more catastrophic. So in a way, the freedom for people to express their ideas, no matter how bad they are, or how defective they are, is very important from a pre-therapeutic perspective, because it actually helps a lot of these people to express it and get it out there and receive some pushback. A number of years ago, some white supremacist group came here to Vancouver, BC, Canada, and they rented the grounds around City Hall on one of the days of a weekend. And so I heard about this on the radio, and the news are covering about this going on. I'm thinking, oh, good, I'm going to go down there, I'm going to hear what they have to say, and then I'm going to tell them my view. If I'm sure I'm probably going to disagree with what they say. That was my measured attitude, to go and do that. And I thought, maybe a few hundred people will be like me showing up there, and we'll see how it goes. About 30,000 people showed up, angry against the white supremacists. I managed to, and the white supremacists ended up getting surrounded by police so they wouldn't get attacked. And I thought, wow, this is so fantastic, because they could do this. I got to know that not only their views, but that over 30,000 people here in my cities care about this stuff. That was important insight for me. Had this been silenced, I wouldn't know that 30,000 people would have cared about this. So this made me feel very good about my city. It helped me to get to know my fellow citizens better. The free exchange of ideas, I call it, and it's so important.
Well, I think that's a great segue to maybe play another couple of minutes of the video. Before we do, I want to say this, which I think is when we talk about liberal values, those values do have to be about freedom of speech and freedom of expression. And there was in the U.S. there was a subway incident where there was a Nazi talking to. At least self-proclaimed Nazi. Maybe he was just drunk, but who?
Okay, I'll just stop you right there. Yeah. Earlier, you asked about the no true Scotsman fallacy.
Yes.
If somebody tells me they're a Christian, or they tell me they're a Nazi, or they tell me they're a Muslim, or a Jew, or whatever, or a Buddhist, I'm inclined to just take them at their word for it. I don't have a reason to do that. Now, if it's a person dressed up in some Muslim outfit comes along and tells me they're a Christian, yeah, I'm going to have some questions about the inconsistency I'm seeing. But that's not what's typically happening. If somebody tells me, I have no reason to doubt it. But when I talk to different Muslims and Christians over the years in particular, I ask them what are the most important things that make a person a Christian or a Muslim, respectively, and in accordance to what they are, right? And the common denominator that they all tell me, the Muslims all agree on it, a belief in Allah. A lot of them talk about Muhammad as well. The Christians all say a belief in their God, Yahweh, Jesus, whatever. So this seems to be the only requirement, and it's consistent with Pascal's gambit or Pascal's wager. You got to believe in the God, right?
I like that. I like that a lot.
So when somebody says that, I know that fundamentally it means they believe in the deity of that religion. And as far as how they practice the religion, that can be all over the board.
I like that.
Depends on the individual. So that's how I look at it. So,
damn it all! You said I'm going to solve that real easy and I'll do it in 1 minute. And I was like, oh, he's so full of shit. When we get there, I'm going to bust his chops when it takes longer. And god damn it, you did it in under a minute. Son of a. All right, so we got a super chat, and then I'm going to finish that one, and we'll do a little more of the video. Amiga Nuts, yeah, okay. Super chat, $10.
Well, if you want me to do something in less than 10 seconds, I might be able to blow your socks off. So you know how they're...
at least
I'll let the background out first.
I am civilized, sir. I wear socks on my streams. We all know your position. We know your position.
For now, you're wearing socks.
Yeah, okay. Fair.
So I was talking with a Christian a while ago, and they're saying that it's not, their God is constrained by the laws of logic, but aside from that, they're all powerful and everything. And so the example they gave me is that their God cannot create a married bachelor. I'm sure you've heard this before.
Yeah, oh yeah.
So I said to them, so if I can demonstrate without violating the laws of logic that it is possible to be a married bachelor, would you consider me more powerful than your deity in this manner? And if I did it in less than 10 seconds. So, in your reaction, you're laughing because you think this is not possible. That's what everybody thinks. So, in less than 10 seconds, I told them, somebody who's got both, I guess, they have a fiance and a spouse, because they're polygamist, would be a married bachelor.
Fuck, you're probably right on that. That's actually very similar to tell you the truth, though. I'm going to stay away from that one because I almost got murdered more than once for this, just because I like language. Are
your socks still on?
Oh dear Lord, what happened? No. Okay, I may be religious now. You've done the exact opposite.
Oh, I'm not pushing religion. That's your problem. I'm not pushing religion here. That's your problem.
So I want to get to the super chat because that's a good one, but I also want to say this. So my wife, I did something which I thought is fuck. You know what? I can't do this around my wife, which is she and I got married, and then for the longest time I introduced her as my ex-girlfriend. I mean, we're married. She's not my girlfriend anymore. She's my wife.
My wife is my girlfriend.
My wife is my ex-girlfriend. She used to be a girlfriend, and then she upgraded. But that means she's no longer, I'm just...
Oh,
all right.
We're still...
You know what? Fine. You don't appreciate the argument. Obviously,
you're trying to get rid of the fun, man. That's
obviously she got to you. So the super chat here. Okay. I love this quote. Without the capability, it's $10, Amiga Nuts. Thank you very much. Without the capability to think irrationally, creativity is squelched. Randolph Richardson, president of Canadian Atheists. So,
wow, hey, it's official now. It's a quote. Official. Thank you very, very much for putting that in quote form. I appreciate that.
So we had seen this video of a Nazi guy who's going around just uttering all this shit about, blacks are inferior. He's just like, you're inferior. It was British. It was so you're inferior. I am superior to you. I am superior. And he starts yelling at the guy. And finally,
you almost sound like a Dalek from Doctor Who there when you say that.
One of them, good, great. One of them goes around, cold cocks him, and he is knocked unconscious in one shot. Now, this went around. So many people loved it and thought it was, and we had a whole episode dedicated to when's it okay to punch a Nazi. And it's a difficult because it's sort of like one of the things is when you punch a Nazi, then I'm sitting there going, because I am a liberal and because I believe in freedom of speech and because despite as disgusting as this is, although if it's harassment, by the way, because it does seem to border on harassment. Okay, at that point, maybe there's something the police can do, but nonetheless, I'm sitting there going, please don't punch the Nazi. You know, it's like because then I have to defend the Nazi, which is the last thing I really want to do. So please don't let the KKK guy do his thing. Please don't make us have to put police around him.
So where I delineate here is it makes it really easy because a lot of people struggle with this. And what I'll do is I'll say, okay, as soon as the free exchange of ideas gets escalated to acts of violence, it's no longer a free exchange of ideas. So don't escalate it to an act of violence, and it continues to be the free exchange of ideas. So that's it.
So let's play a little bit more of this.
Real simple.
There we go.
So whoever punched the Nazi because of what they're saying is in the wrong, in my opinion. Although I also think the Nazi's in the wrong, but it doesn't justify escalating to violence.
Yep. No. I think that's my view. But it's sort of like now we got to defend a Nazi because he's got the same rights we all. I mean, it's sort of like when people say, "Oh, the mass murderer shouldn't get a competent defense attorney." Excuse me. Obvious. You either believe for freedom of speech and/or defense attorneys and/or rights for everybody or nobody. There is no middle ground. That's one of the very few things that I've noticed in life that is a binary position.
In Canada, prisoners still have the right to vote. In the US, I understand that's not the case. And that makes me very sad because that's a failing of democracy in my view. Carry on.
Yep. Oh, I like this one. Okay, this is Maya. It's never okay to punch a Nazi, but it's always reasonable. I guess that's well put. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah, that's well done. Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Let's do it. What I think we're going to do here, if this works for you, maybe
that makes 15. The point. That makes the point so well. Yeah.
It does. That was a good one. Add with humor. So maybe do another, say, 15, 20 minutes if that works for you. And then if you actually have some time and are willing to join us in our Discord, I'm sure there are people who have questions for you.
I have more time if you want. If the video goes longer too, I'm okay with that. So.
All right. Well, let's do the video here.
Just not true.
Can I just express how I think it breaks down in terms of
the idea?
You haven't even defined.
You're trying to say that these few people. That's all the problem is. These few bad apples. The idea that someone should be killed if they leave the Islamic.
That's horrible. That should
wait. You're saying that the idea that
Islam.
someone should be killed if they leave the Islamic religion is just a few bad apples?
The people who would actually believe and enact that you murder somebody if they leave Islam is not the majority of Muslims at all.
Okay, is it? Let me break this down for you. Okay, we have, as you say, we have 1.5, 1.6 billion Muslims. Now,
second biggest religion in the world, a quarter.
Well,
Ben, let me unpack this. Let me unpack this for you.
Please do.
We have just imagine some concentric circles here. You have at the center, you have jihadists. These are people who wake up in the morning wanting to kill apostates, wanting to die trying. They believe in paradise. They believe in martyrdom. Outside of them, we have Islamists. These are people who are just as convinced of martyrdom and paradise and wanting to foist their religion on the rest of humanity, but they want to work within the system. They're not going to blow themselves up on a bus. They want to change governments. They want to use democracy against itself. Those two circles arguably are 20% of the Muslim world. Okay, this is not the fringe of the fringe.
That research on?
A bunch of poll results that we can talk about. So to give you one point of contact, 78% of British Muslims think that the Danish cartoonist should have been prosecuted. 78%. So I'm being conservative when I roll this back to 20%. But outside of that circle, you have conservative Muslims who can honestly look at ISIS and say that does not represent us, that we're horrified by that, but they hold views about human rights and about women, about homosexuals that are deeply troubling. So these are not Islamists, they're not jihadists, but they both.
Those views are anathema to ours.
But they also keep women and homosexuals immiserated in these cultures, and we have to empower the true reformers in the Muslim world to change it. And lying about the link between doctrine and behavior is not going to do that.
But the Great Divide. The Great Divide is not between Islam and the rest. It's rather between the fundamentalists and the moderates in each faith.
Okay, but we're misled to think that the fundamentalists are the fringe. Okay, we have jihadists, Islamists, and conservatives.
Well, and by the way,
it depends hundreds of millions of people fit that description.
You're saying that the strongest voices are coming from those who are jihadists and extremists, and that represents a bigger piece of the pie than we often think is true.
There's no question.
Okay, so having said that, and even if that is true statistically or otherwise, the key thing to recognize that I don't think is part of the argument, but I think should be, is that there are voices that are oftentimes raised in opposition to these jihadists and to these extreme acts. But guess what? They don't get covered. They don't get exposed. And they're not given the same level of platform that we see the jihadists.
One reason they don't get exposed is because they're afraid to speak out, because it's the only religion that acts like the mafia, that will fucking kill you if you say the wrong thing, draw the wrong picture, or write the wrong book.
So you do have,
and that's
all right.
It's not the only one.
No, it's not the only one.
It's not the only religion.
It's not.
But otherwise, I agree with this point.
It's not, but I did also want to bring up sort of another thing, which is, of course, you must be familiar with this argument, and I'm curious as to your views on it, which is, look, Christianity for a minimum of 1,500 years did do all of these things, and oh dear Lord, even though it wasn't in the Bible, you're not going to draw a cartoon of Jesus. If you did, there was a real chance you were going to get killed. And the religion eventually moderated and became sort of, for the most part, what it is we see today. And there are extremists, and the KKK is, by the way, a spectacular example of them. I've been told before, why are there no Christian terrorists? It's like, excuse me? What?
Okay, they're bombing abortion clinics and doing other things, so the terrorists do exist.
Yep, but it is certainly, the religion as a whole is nowhere near as violent as it used to be, and so the idea is the biggest problem with Islam is that it's still new and hasn't had a chance to moderate, and hasn't had enough people going over the text saying, well, here are more moderate interpretations, at least credible people going over the text, as has happened over the centuries with Christianity.
So what it looks like to me is that Islam has been practiced in very isolated ways from the rest of the world for a very long time, and they're just more recently getting into it, and there has been huge shock for a lot of people when they get on the internet for the first time, or they see people in public in the rest of the world who are not dressed in the manner that they're expecting, and showing their face, showing their ankles. Their men and women are holding hands publicly in the street and things like that. Women are not walking behind the men, they're walking beside or in front, and there's women doing hard labor jobs that men are doing, and they're seeing all kinds of equality and things. And in these isolated societies that haven't had exposure to the progressing world, when they see, and I'm talking about the ones that have been isolated for all this time, and then they encounter this, the way that they've been used to, some of them have been used to any kind of transgression being dealt with, is always very harshly. And then because remember, it's on an older system, an older legal system that's sorely outdated compared to today's standards. There's no insightful Magna Carta. There's no insightful John Rawls' veil of ignorance. There's nothing like that going on. There's no concept of human rights. There's the Cairo Accord, which is a joke. If you're going to take it as human rights, it's a joke. It doesn't work. It's all pro-Sharia. So when these people end up seeing this and they're shocked, their first reaction is, oh, okay, get the police to take care of it or take it into their own hands, and here's the punishment they're used to. And so, again, this is where immigration has failed. But, take a look at China. They have the Great Firewall, and they've been quite good, or say not good, they've been quite effective at gradually opening up access to the masses, where and it's all over the place now, but the whole country is fully immersed in the internet now. But there's and there are certain things that are still blocked, but the vast majority of things are accessible there. I know this because I work with running internet servers for a lot of different clients as part of my professional work. So in these, like Saudi Arabia and Iran and other places, suddenly getting internet practically overnight and not having that gradual control of introducing it into society, there's huge shock value for people. So the reactions will end up looking kind of extreme to us, whereas these other people who've been isolated, there's nothing extreme about this. What they're seeing is a large number of people breaking all the rules that they're assuming the whole world goes by. And that's where I think we're seeing a big part of the culture clash.
All right. I have another question, and I was sort of half thinking of saving this to the end, but no, you know what? I'm going to save this closer to the end because it's a completely non sequitur here. We've got about 3 minutes left on this, so let's play this, and then let's see where this lands us.
There's a reason why Ayaan Hirsi Ali needs bodyguards 24/7.
You do have that element of fear as well, but you also have other braver souls out there who do speak out and who
who are risking their lives to do that.
Like the Muslim clerics and others from Australia to Europe to the United States just recently publicly put their names on paper declaring their opposition to what ISIS and others are doing. So there are those voices, but where was the coverage? Where was that story to sort of create a different picture?
Well, what is your solution? What is your ask?
I'm going to say he's got one good point there, because and was that Chairman Steele? That must have been Chairman Steele. Okay. I'm sorry. It's just when I realized I said he's got a good point and that I was talking about Chairman Steele at the same time, I just regurgitated a bit in my mouth. But I'll be okay. I will be okay. I'm gonna need to take a breath. So the point that he's got is this, which is even news organizations have falsely reported. And we got that. It's actually, what is it? It's whatever the sound is there again. But we've got it sounds like you're in a waterfall. So we've got oh, perfect. Thank you. When I want to forget when it was. It was the nightclub shooting, which did turn out to be by a Muslim, and every Muslim organization, every major Muslim organization in the United States, which, as I recall, constituted 28 different organizations, including the Arab League, I'm starting to get a little tired, so I'm probably not going to remember all the names, and then also every major Arab nation, all condemned it. And shortly after that, now Fox News did this, but also what ended up happening was Fox News wasn't the only ones to do this, but somebody from Fox News, somebody who was purportedly supposed to know about these things, said, why isn't anyone in the Muslim world condemning this? And it's like everybody in I think it was Sean Hannity actually who said that. And then it was repeated by, I think, ABC News, most of the other news organizations, and then ABC corrected themselves. Fox never corrected themselves. Wow, shock. But they came out and said, ABC...
That's Fox News for you.
Yeah, oh, Jesus, I know. ABC even said there hasn't been any condemnations from the Arab community, and it's like it's every single Arab-speaking country and every U.S. Arab organization and you
Sure.
just said so. So I think they got a point there. I want to point that out when he says it's not being covered. Boy, is he right about that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's okay. So
Okay.
yeah, that's it. I just wanted to stop and point out, and I do think that we have a problem. This was one. This was my first death threat. I had written a piece that I actually had translated into Arabic, and somebody in Qatar got very upset about it. They didn't actually read the piece, but in it I compared how we react to what Christianity does versus how we react to what is done by Islam, and there are plenty of people who. It started with the worst, most violent quote I could find in the Quran, which was pretty gruesome. But I then put in the worst, most violent quote I could find in the Bible, and it turns out they were really rather equivalent. And people say, well, the Quran is a book of violence, ergo, and it's like, well, so is the Bible. So it seems.
So is the Book of Mormon and other scriptures too.
Yeah, and so why? Okay, here's a question. Why do you think so few practitioners? I have a test that I do, and I got to stop talking about this on air because people are going to figure it out. But there are multiple tests. But I have a test that I do. So when I'm talking to an atheist, and I'm sorry, not an atheist, a Christian, and I'm trying to understand a bit more about their position and maybe trying to challenge it some, I talk about the 14 pairs of animals, actually 14 animals, 17 pairs, 7 pairs, 14 animals of each kind that went on the ark. And if they let me get away with that, I say this is somebody who's read the Bible, because that is it was the 14 of the clean, 2 of the dirty, and then God even changed his mind. It was originally supposed to be 14 of all of them. But to say 14 is as valid as to say 2 if you read the Bible. So I always go with 14. And I wait and see, and roughly half, which I suppose isn't bad, of Christians I speak with try to correct me. And they're like, no, it was 2. I was just like, oh, was it? And so now I know that whoever I'm speaking with hasn't read the Bible. They've been told, but they haven't read. So I just use a number that's completely defensible. 2 is defensible too, but 14 is equally defensible. And so that's a test that I use just to know who I'm talking to and whether they've actually read the book. Why have so many people not read the Holy Book, do you think? In any religion.
I think it's easier to just listen. That's why audiobooks are so popular. And I think what'll happen is, my understanding is when the Gutenberg press first came out and made reading material was gradually becoming more readily available to people, more people suddenly start taking up interest in learning how to read. And it's kind of a luxury thing in time where it's still very hard to survive. So, but more and more people being able to read. And I think this scared the church, because because before then, with an illiterate mass populace, they had to. They were the stewards of what the Bible said, and they were interpreting it. And I suspect people would go to the church with their problems, and the church would the clergy would first listen to what the problem is, and then they would come up with something in the Bible, and they'd pick different things depending on the desired outcome that they're after. Not necessarily, of course, something that will seem like is going to help the person, but perhaps they're going to favor things that will also reflect well on the church, I suppose. I don't see why they wouldn't do that. So what'll happen is you could have perhaps 2 people go to 2 different clergy with the same problem and get different Bible passages to deal with it. And if they compare, then it's very easily to just brush it off to people who can't read the Bible and say, well, this is what we really meant, and easily do public relations quick fix and everything's fine. So I don't think you really had a lot of people being very skeptical either. And then, of course, now we're at the time of the internet where you've got people who are reading and writing. This is the next phase, and people can put their opinions out and produce videos and blog and all this stuff and publish whatever they want on their own personal websites. So and I remember that seemed to initially scare the churches as well, but they seem to be okay with it now. They've adapted, but it just took them a bit behind for adaptation, but they finally did. So I think traditionally, the churches probably still, I think they still kind of, at least indirectly, promote the idea of people listening to the leader of the church reading and providing an interpretation, because that's quite easy. And then you're in with the whole group that are all taking the same interpretation. And my understanding is in these churches, people don't typically reject what the clergy are saying. They just tend to go along with it. And these are the people who haven't fallen asleep in the pews, of course. Because some people go there just to sleep. But it's always easier to just listen than it is to actually do the reading yourself and thinking about it. And I find is a lot of people are very intellectually lazy. They don't want to think. So I think it's presented as, oh, this is the church providing this service. Come and listen and you can learn more. And then they'll tell people what to read later, what parts, and they'll tell them how to interpret it. And I think a lot of people like doing homework, especially like younger people. When I was younger, it was like this too. I didn't want to do all the homework that it was assigned to me. So I think people do have a tendency to find the easy way out, and the church is catering to that. I believe that's what's going on. I think they're very careful to not make it look very obvious, but I do suspect that this is what they're doing.
All right, that makes a lot of sense. All right, perfect. Well, let me do. There's only about 2.5 minutes left on this, and then we'll discuss that, and then a few more questions, and then maybe wrap it up. And I think that'll be all right. Perfect.
The solution. No. The solution is very much what
we've killed more Muslims than they've killed us by an awful lot. We've invaded more Muslims.
I am not for more killing.
An awful lot. And yet somehow we're exempted from these things because they're not really a reflection of what we believe in. We did by accident. That's why we invaded Iraq and put 4 million people.
We're not convincing anybody.
It's not I'm specifically telling you that I disagree with what you think.
I know, and we're obviously not convincing anybody of you.
If you don't understand my argument,
your argument is like, black people, they show each other.
That is not my argument.
No, it's not. It's based on facts. I can show you a pew of Egyptians. They are not outliers in the Muslim world that say like 90% of them believe death is the appropriate response to leaving the religion. If 90% of Brazilians thought that death was the appropriate response to leaving Catholicism, you would think it was a bigger deal.
I would think it's a big deal no matter what.
Okay, but that's the fact.
You don't.
But what I wouldn't do is say it's all Brazilians, or I wouldn't say, well, Ted Bundy did this. Goddamn, these gays, they're all trying to eat each other.
Yeah, okay, let me just give you what you want. There are hundreds of millions of Muslims who are nominal Muslims, who don't take the faith seriously, who don't want to kill apostates, who are horrified by ISIS, and we need to defend these people, prop them up, and let them reform.
Dude, you're talking, ISIS couldn't fill a AA ballpark in Charleston, West Virginia, and you're making a career out of ISIS.
But no, it's not just ISIS. It's all jihadists. It's global. It's a phenomenon of global jihad.
I think that's the opposite.
There is those things. There's ISIS, there's global jihadists. The question is the degree to which you're willing to say, because I've witnessed this behavior, which we all object to on the part of these people, I'm willing to flatly condemn those of you I don't know and have never met.
No,
this is
not
based
condemning
on
people. It's ideas.
And people who believe in those ideas.
So it's those people who believe in
based on reality, Ben. We're not making it up that that in the Muslim world it is mainstream belief.
But this is such a caricature of Indonesia, of Malaysia, so much of the world. And this does have the tinge a little bit of the way white racists talk about African Americans and define blacks by.
What you're saying is because they are a minority, we shouldn't criticize.
They're not that much of a minority. It's the second biggest religion in the world.
Exactly, but you're treating them like a minority. I mean, if Filipinos were capturing teenagers and sending them into white slavery, we would criticize that. We wouldn't say, well, they're
criticize
Filipinos.
the people who are doing it, not the Philippines. You know what I mean?
Well, what if the people
As a Filipino kid lives down the street from you, it have nothing to do with that. So these are different things, crazy
racial
people.
stereotyping.
I think it goes.
Let's talk. We mentioned ISIS. Let's talk about that.
All right. Oh, so any thoughts on that? We've got the audio again. I muted you during the thing just a bit because we are getting some of that background noise. But so I don't know if you.
The family member here is just walking around, so no problem. Well, there's a lot of disagreement there. There's it seems like Ben Affleck is reading more into what Sam is saying than what Sam actually said, Sam Harris, and. He needed some correction. My understanding is that Sam Harris had since spoken with Ben Affleck afterwards, and he got got things all cleared up. It was probably would have been better if they spoke about these issues backstage first. It was certainly starting to turn into quite a fight when
Oh yeah, well, and that made national news, and I'm glad. I think that's worth discussing. It's when I brought it up, I was like, okay, this was a bit older than I thought, but it still is. It brings up a lot of.
So what Sam Harris is saying about the hundreds of millions of Muslims who don't like what Islamic State is doing and don't want the violence and things like that, I think he's absolutely right. These are the people who need supporting. Christopher Hitchens talked about this too, and there's others as well. Yeah. And there are people in many of these other countries who are even working underground to try to bring things back to a more rational and more updated human rights kind of structure. It's really hard, though, because these governments are very paranoid about any outsiders possibly getting in and intervening. So they've got quite a battle on their hands. Battle for freedom, basically.
Well, so to bring this back to you and your organization for a minute, so I wanted to ask. It sounds like what you really would most like to see is equality for those who are not believers, who certainly in the United States,
atheists.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Who certainly in the United States can. Find themselves in a lot of trouble. Again, I used to teach high school, and it was sort of like if the parents found out that I was an atheist, I knew I was going to, because it's like you cannot have somebody who's got no morals teaching you. And sort of like, okay, can we put that down?
That's an example. That's an example of the stigma that I'd really like to see gone from society. It doesn't help anybody. It only makes things worse. We need to be uplifting each other instead of putting each other down, and that's an example of how people are put down. And like, you're probably felt some stress. I wouldn't be surprised with that. What happens if these parents find out? And the thoughts probably at least crossed your mind. And this is not, to me, this is not a normal working condition for anybody. People shouldn't have to worry about these things.
So we know sort of what your long-term goals are. What are your short-term goals? What would you say in the next maybe 6 months you're going to say to yourself is going to be a success for you, either in the growth of your organization or in platform? What are things that you'd like to see more short-term?
Well, like the things that we're doing?
Yes.
Yeah, because these things that are in society are kind of ongoing, long-running kind of projects, because we know that we can't change everybody overnight. But if we can encourage people, it's going to take time and effort. But as more and more people get on board with it, and there have been quite a few, the Atheist Roundtable TART channel, the International Atheist Alliance, these are two organizations that have jumped on board with this Normalize Atheism campaign. So this is really great. One of the kind of more short-term things is to start a program called True North Talk, which will be an atheism call-in program, similar to what Atheist Experience has been doing for a very long time. We're going to be Canadian-focused, of course, and one of my co-hosts is going to be Neil, the 604 Atheist. We've also got a gentleman named Mikey Famine who's helping us with production. So they're both excellent people. I'm really happy to be working with both of them on this. Mm-hmm. So we're actually literally building a studio for this, and for this show, for this program, and we're going to have it where people can call in, and the approach we're going to use is going to be, of course, Canadian style, very polite, very easygoing, and we'll basically be willing to discuss any topic, except I think we'll probably steer clear of politics, because a lot of people don't really enjoy that. We want it to be, and then it just tends to upset people too much, and I think I'd rather we'll focus on other topics. So that's what we're going to do. We're hopeful that this show is going to do well. And there's a website for it, www.truenorthtalk.ca, and that has a link to the YouTube channel. People can see that there is some progress for the construction, for the renovations shown there already. so it is going a little slower because I'm not a professional builder, but I'm learning a lot, and Neil has helped me out tremendously with quite a lot of it as well. So this has been great. Mikey's too far away, or I'm sure he'd be here trying to help out with all kinds of stuff too. It's once that's running, I think that's going to help.
Mikey's Chicago. Unless he's moved.
Yeah, you know him. Good.
I do.
Yeah. So that's this is the kind of one of the kind of public outreach things we're going to do. Another one will be a program similar to what American Atheists did a long time ago, with having some kind of a consortium of some sort where people all get together and they pay for a ticket to come in and watch speakers, and the money from that pays for renting the facility, insurance, and the speakers and whatnot, so we can bring all that in. And then so we're going to run that kind of a show. I think Faithless Forum is doing the same thing as well. So we wanted to get this started last year, but the coronavirus, the COVID-19, caused us to put those plans on hold, because obviously we don't want to bring large numbers of people together when there's a pandemic on the rise. We don't want to be contributing to the spread of the virus. So of course, on hold it goes. But maybe if things go really well with the vaccines around the world, we can do it later this year. Otherwise, realistically, we'll probably have to wait till next year to start it. And that'll be a nice one, because it'll be great to meet so many different people in person and bring in some presenters to talk about various subjects. And I'm really looking forward to this. And so it's we have some budgets and all kinds of things figured out. We have a bunch of community programs that we want to do that involve people getting together, going for hikes and book clubs and stuff. So we want to do all these things, but we have them on hold because of the coronavirus. We can't do them right now. So that's okay. It's giving us more time for planning, but we'll get these things going. So those are kind of more of the short-term things we want to do. And these things, what it all boils down to and what it's centered around is that we're trying to present atheism in the best possible light. And we want to demonstrate and show people that atheists have all sorts of other interests, just like theists do. There's really nothing different other than we don't believe in any deities. That's the only difference. And everything else, we're people just like everybody else. It's all the same stuff. There's polite people, there's people who aren't so polite, and there's a whole gamut in between. And this is just normal stuff, common stuff that happens with humanity.
All right. Well, I that sounds delightful. I was sad that my first Faithless Forum, of course, got canceled. But it sounds like, if you're doing something along those lines, I think it sounds quite enjoyable. Mr. Richardson, thank you very much for joining us. I think you speak on behalf of everyone in the live chat and who's been here, that we really appreciate having you. I'm looking forward. Again, it's going to be in 2 weeks. We're going to have you back. I don't know if you have a link to
Thank
the
you,
Discord.
Mr. Soutter. Thank you, Mr. Soutter. I greatly appreciate being invited to be on your program. Everything on your screen looks so classy. It's a very nice experience being here.
Well, thank you. I sincerely appreciate it. It's the hard work of a great many people, as I'm sure you can guess. So,
okay.
What I'll do is I will send you a link to the Discord if you don't have it yet, and hopefully you can come on in and everybody will hang out. I will join for a little bit, but I'm a little late on putting the girls to bed. I'm glad we did this show. I told my wife I may end up being a little late, and I am very lucky that she's as supportive as she is, because I'm sitting here going, I think I'm going to do a news channel that interviews, atheists. How do you feel about that? So I lucked out. So thank you very much for coming. Please, if you've gotten this far in the show, I assume that means you liked it. And one great way to support this channel is to hit that like button and hit the subscribe button. It really does help us out. It helps us out in the algorithm, and it just makes it easier for this show to get out to more people. So if you could do that, that would be great. Titan has put a link to the Discord right in the live chat, so that's there. And usually takes me about 5 minutes after I wrap up. I got to talk to my family and get things sorted, but I will be right there. We're going to have mods there already, and it's going to be in the Yes.
Can I take a rain check on the Discord chat? Because I do have some family stuff I have to take care of. I'd like to join you on Discord maybe another day this week, if that's possible. I don't want to disappoint the audience here, but I'd like to speak with the audience, but I do have to take care of some stuff here that needs before the stores close. and if you're still running later,
I'm the host of the show, which means they're pretty used to disappointment by now. So don't worry about it. And what we'll do is we'll get you sorted out. Well, you and I share a whole bunch of these Discords in common. We will talk. We'll get it worked out. But either way, you'll be back in 2 weeks. And if we do these a little earlier, it might be easier on everyone. So thank you so much. I'll be in there. I'll be in there in about 5 or 10 minutes anyways, folks. So I look forward to seeing you. Thank you to all the mods, everybody who's helped out so much. Thank you again to Mr. Richardson. And we look forward to seeing you guys on Thursday for overtime. Good night, all.